Well, welcome. We're here again.
Yeah.
And we're so glad you joined us here today. We've actually got a special guest all the way from the UK, which is really exciting. You're with us live today, Josh.
Yep, I'm here. I'm
Yes,
not
yeah.
going anywhere.
So we're going to have a great day. So I'm glad you joined us. We're live everywhere, and so stick around. We'll be back in just a minute. Well, that's right. It's Sunday afternoon here in lovely Bali, and it's a nice temperature. It's been raining a bit.
Yeah, it stopped raining today a little bit, which has been good.
I shouldn't complain, but it has been amazing. But the weather has been really good, and we have a special guest. And so we're in the afternoon here. They are in the UK, and I'm just going to introduce him right now. We're going to welcome John, who's a great friend of ours from the UK. John, welcome.
Good morning. It's good afternoon to you. Good morning here.
It's good to have you, John. And I know, Janet, it's breakfast time for you, and so you're having breakfast and doing all that sort of stuff. Hey, Janet.
Morning. No, afternoon, sorry.
So great to have you. Just so for the people who don't know, John and Janet are wonderful friends of ours who have been here to Bali on a number of occasions. And I've said, I think last week, they're sort of like the grandparents of our church. And we feel like you're the grandparents. And so it's a real honour to have you with us today. Yeah. A little bit of background. Was a Baptist minister, retired now. So give us a little bit of your background, John, so people know who you are.
Well, I started as a school teacher. I taught history. I kind of drifted into teaching music. And then I got called into ministry. So I trained as a Baptist minister. I had a church that I led up in York for 9 years. Then we moved back to London, and I pastored a church in London for 21 years till I retired.
We dropped a little bit there. It's we're having a little bit of connection issues, but we heard a bit of that. So yeah. So Cirencester.
Cirencester's a lovely place. It's a small town. I suppose it would be called a market town, but it has a wonderful history because between 100 years ago, of course, the Romans were here in the UK, and they built the town of Cirencester. It was called Corinium then, and it was apparently the largest town in and it has a wonderful little museum full of Roman remains, and nearly every time they do any new build, digging the foundations, they uncover a new archaeological site. The last one, which was about 4 years ago, I think it was while we were here, they uncovered a complete coffin with a complete of a teenage girl.
Wow.
And that was terribly exciting, apparently.
There you go. Wow, you were asking a bit about that, weren't you?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the name. And your wife was talking about the amphitheater you guys have just down the road, Roman amphitheater.
Yeah, we're very close to an old amphitheater, which was built outside the walls of the town in Roman times, which was... And it's very clear to see it. It's all just earth mounds now, but it's a wonderful amphitheater.
With the lockdown now, you could make that into a church. You could do it just like Paul
Well, it wouldn't be big enough, to be honest, for our church at the moment. We were, for UK standards, we're a big church. On Sunday morning at the main service, and apparently we're getting over 2,000 at our live link service at the moment. So we couldn't get all those. You could all close together, but not socially distanced.
Yeah.
But one thing that we might do, I sing in a choir, the Cirencester Male Voice Choir, and we meet once a week on a Zoom call. You can't really sing with Zoom. I mean, we try it. We're talking about doing an open air choir practice, and for that we probably will use the amphitheatre, and that would be great fun.
Awesome. Wow. The natural reverb should be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Now, just a couple of other questions before we move on. What are you reading at the moment? Because it is a bit of a lockdown. So what are you reading?
Well, I've always got a book on the go. I read trashy novels. This is what I'm reading at the moment. You know this? I Am Pilgrim.
No.
Oh, well, it's a thriller, and it's pretty amazing.
Oh.
By a guy called Terry Hayes.
It
calls it an international bestseller, but I don't know.
They're all that, aren't they? Every book's got an.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, Josh, what were you?
If you like thrillers and you like a meaty book, you can see it's.
Wow.
And that's how far I'm into it at the moment. It's really a very good read.
Nice. And Josh, reading?
Not a whole lot of reading. I've been reclaiming the jungle in which I live right now. I've been building a French drain right behind my truck.
A French drain? You gotta explain that.
Well, it's so that, like the shower water and the water from the sink from my kitchen can go into the ground and not like settle like a nice mud patch. So it's like you got to dig a big hole, and then you got to put big rocks down first, I believe. That's the theory that I'm working with, and then the small rocks go on top. So yeah, it's been a fun little project I've been working on. So.
Well, I'm not reading. Well, I am sort of reading one book. The series that we're actually doing, which we're going to be talking about today, the Psalm series. There's a book I've been going through for that. But yesterday I was up in Ubud and went into a bookstore, and they had a sale on, and I got recommended a book around Christmas time, probably December last year, called The Tipping Point.
Oh, that's a good one.
By Malcolm Gladwell. Anyway, someone said, you got to read it. Anyway, I didn't get around to grabbing it. And I was in the bookshop yesterday, and what was there, 20% discount, was this book. So I bought it yesterday, but I haven't started it. I just flicked to the first page, and it talks about pandemic. And it's like, and it talks about, hush puppies is the thing. Is like, okay, I'm going to be interested in reading this. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's a good book. You're going to like that. Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell is full of like learning about dynamics and things that are going on, and all the things that are under the surface of what you're really seeing. Yeah. That's exciting. It's
probably going to be a bit better than another book I've got that's called Surrounded by Idiots, but I haven't started that one yet either. But anyway, it's good to have you with us, John. I know it's morning there, and so you've probably seen scrolling on the bottom of the screen if you tuned in that after the service we've got a Zoom hangout, and you can come and join us after the service for that hangout. John and Janet, they actually won't be joining us because straight after we get off here, they're going to their live stream, which that's amazing, getting up to 2,000 people now. That's really good, John. Who'd have thought? Yeah. Who'd have thought? So we're looking forward to having you join us today. So where do we start? Well, if you have been following us, which a lot of people have, we've been going through Psalm 23. It has been, some would say, a long process, but it's been a really good process, just taking time, just looking at all the different statements and looking at, what David was writing here and how it applies to our world now. And so up to the statement where it says that my cup overflows. We're sort of getting really towards the end. And so when we look at that statement, before we sort of delve into it, what comes to mind? Either, John, maybe you can start. What comes to mind when you hear that statement, my cup overflows?
Well, it automatically, I think, gets me thinking about God's provision, his blessing, and the fact that it's always super, super abundant. Yeah. I suppose of probably two different scriptures. One from the Old Testament, one from the teaching of Jesus. And the teaching of Jesus is the one that talks, it's from Luke chapter 6. And it talks about God pouring his blessing into us and it's shaken down, pressed down, and yet still overflows.
Yeah.
I expect many people are familiar with that. But there's another passage that I kind of found before ever I went into ministry, and I absolutely love it. It's from the book of Malachi, and it's in chapter 3, and it talks about God will open the windows of heaven and pour out such a blessing that you'll not be able to contain.
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah.
But of course, both of those passages come with a little bit of a proviso, which I'd quite like to talk a bit more about in a bit.
Yeah. No, go for it. Go for it.
Go for it now?
Yeah, why not? Go for it now. We've got you all the way from the UK, so we're going to get our money's worth. So.
Well, the Malachi passage, if anybody's familiar with it, they'll probably know. It's really a rebuke. The prophet is bringing God's rebuke to his people because they're not worshiping God in the way that they should. And very specifically, the context, and I always think context is everything, that the context is bringing of tithes and offerings. And God says the people are not doing that. That they're kind of pretending to, but they're not really doing it. And it even says that they're effectively robbing God because the tithe is his due. And if you're not bringing it, then you're effectively God. In that context, it says, bring the full amount of the tithe to the temple, and then you will see, I will open the windows of heaven.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of conditional thing. And similarly, in Jesus's teaching, it's Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount, really, in Luke chapter 6. And he says, the measure with which you give, it will be given to you.
Yeah.
And that's shaken together, pressed down, and still overflowing. It's the measure of what you give, which again kind of sounds conditional. That I would immediately want to say, but God's blessing, God's provision isn't conditional. It's unconditional. And I think that's hugely important. So there's a kind of almost a contradiction, a kind of paradox thing going on here. God wants to bless us. God does bless us. God has blessed us. And it doesn't depend on us, I don't believe, at all. Paul says, doesn't he? It was while we were still sinners that Christ died.
Yeah.
He didn't wait for us to repent. He didn't wait for us to turn to him. He gave Jesus to be the means. The Good News Bible, I love the Good News Bible. It says Jesus is the means by which our sins are forgiven. Yeah. And that's a free gift. It's not dependent on anything else at all. So we know ultimately that God's provision is unconditional. And yet we have this thing that appears to look like a condition. And what I think about it is, I've heard other preachers I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to, I confess, who have said things like, if you give to God, God will give to you. But the key is you've got to give. And basically what they're saying is, give me your money and God will bless you. And there's an awful lot of that around.
Yeah.
And I think people kind of get the wrong end of this. And what I think is, when we know what God has given us, we just will give.
It's a response then.
It's a response.
Yeah.
But our response is the measure of our understanding of what God's given to us. And in that sense, it's as we give, as we respond to God, that we receive his blessing. I mean, his blessing is there. It's not conditional. But it's not until we realize that and really start to give that we'll kind of really know that blessing.
Yeah. Josh,
when we do, his cup always overflows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts, Josh?
It's just another statement of the acknowledgement of David's identity, his understanding of his identity as the Son of God. And I like all that what you're saying about giving, John, and that's kind of like a reemphasis of it, like that. To the world, our giving is foolishness. I think it's like why would in China when we talk to people about giving to the church, that's one of the hardest things because their mentality is why would you give anything away to anybody else? And so I think it's really important that you say, well, this act of giving is what somebody does when they understand what you're saying is that you're being given to constantly as a son of God. And so, yeah, I hope that like we can do that more, give more in this time. Maybe people don't feel like they're giving to church as much. They're not going to church, but reallocating that to the world around them, I think is a beautiful opportunity that we have.
Yeah, certainly when I look at this, the first thought is abundance. Like this statement is not about just enough. It's not about like, oh, this is all you need. I mean, you've had kids, John. I've had kids, and there are times we go, no, this is what you need. This, But this statement, just in its nature, just those couple of words, my cup overflows, is all about abundance. It's in some ways it can be nearly viewed as wastage. Why would you? I would tell my kids off if they filled like they were getting the orange juice in the cup and I go, why did you fill it all the way to the top? You've made a mess now.
He wanted it to overflow.
Yes. And so from a natural point of view, our even in our own dealings with people around us is to actually hold back, even in those little things, whereas God is in some ways totally the opposite. Yeah, I'm going to give it to you, but it is going to overflow and I don't care. It's not wastage. And I think, that's even just that concept alone for me as I've been processing it this week. I'm thinking far out. In a lot of ways, I'd like to think I'm a generous person with time and other things, not just finances, with other things, but it's like you start to look at it, so many things where I go so far, then stop. Because I think if I go further, that's a waste. Oh, that person I've helped so many times, might as well give up, And so I tend to stop rather than keep, but you know what I mean? It's just the natural thought. But wow. God seems to be so different. And I think also, for me, it shows how much I'm bound to the stuff. That it's like I want to hold it. I don't waste it. I need to hold it. Whereas God's saying, I'm not bound to this stuff. I'm well over and beyond all this. If you just realize who I am, and it's probably what you're getting back to, John, that understanding.
Yeah, I think it's like our default position. I think we're all a bit like the Chinese, Josh. We're all reluctant to give. And it's only when we really get this idea of what God has given to us that we're ready to give ourselves. It's like the woman who poured the ointment on Jesus's feet. Everyone else was horrified because it was excessive. And Jesus said, excuse me. Jesus said that she realized how much she was forgiven. She'd been forgiven much, so she loved much. Yeah. And that's such a key thing. And getting our heads around the idea that God's default position is not the same as ours. We sort of give hesitantly, we give a bit reluctantly. We if we know that somebody needs so much, then we'll perhaps give them that much and no more. But God's default is overabundance all the time. Yeah. Because He's just such a lavish God, a lavish Father who gives super abundantly all the time.
Yeah. And I suppose that just goes to, not just what He does, but His nature. I wrote a few things that His presence has no boundaries. Like omnipresent. It's like there's no boundaries to that. His provision has no expiration date. It's not as, it's like his provision is not just for our moment now, but he will sustain us for eternity. And his protection for us can't be penetrated. He's like, there's not a moment when that's weak. And then obviously his power has no equal, and his provision knows no end in all of that. I think it's just, it just shows, I suppose, David's, as you said, Josh, David's understanding of who he was. But I think what you just said there, John, it comes from this basis. Would you say that it's understanding your forgiveness first that opens this up? You can understand who God is in a theological sense.
No, it's understanding who I am in God, who I have become in Jesus. Yeah. That's the key to opening this all up. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome statement. I actually read, and I think during the week I was trying to find another place, but it actually said that this idea of your cup overflowing would have been something quite well known to the Jewish people, because if you were a guest in their home, now I couldn't actually clarify this, and maybe John, you've heard this before, but when you would come into their home as a guest, they would fill your cup intentionally so it overflowed. And what that told you, this is what I'm reading here, the guest would know that they are welcome to stay as long as they want.
Wow.
And I couldn't, I was looking for it, it's like, I read it and it's like, I got to verify this, but it was just an amazing gesture. It's like, okay, Josh or John, you're welcoming into your home and you need a drink. I fill it to overflow, but it's not the wastage. It's a statement I'm making to you that you're welcome and you can stay as long as you want.
That would feel really nice if you did that.
Yeah.
If you filled up my glass of wine all the way to the top and kept going. I would want to stay longer. For sure.
I think when Joe got you a drink, she didn't overflow it today.
No, but it was just water, so it wouldn't have meant anything.
So
I'm very sorry, I've not heard that before.
I haven't either.
Yeah, I'd like to
I'll do that for you next time when you come over.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see how it works. In the camper, you can do it. We make all kinds of messes.
Okay, in the camper. I'm going to get out to the camper.
I'll do it for you in our garden, but not in our lounge carpet.
Yeah, but I'm a single guy, so I can get the place messed up, no problem.
So just moving on from this, I suppose there's this idea that what Jesus has given us is not half empty, it's not nearly full, it's not, we'll get you some of the way and then you're going to have to work out the rest yourself. It's this, what he's given us is overflowing. It's what you need plus so much more. And I think what's in that plus so much more, we're going to talk a little bit about, as we go on. But I was reading and I watched the thing, Jim Carrey, the comedian, you're probably familiar with him, crazy guy. I don't know what it'd be like to be in the same room with. I think it'd be out of control. But he did this amazing speech. In America, when they have all the graduates, they get a celebrity up that gives what do they call it, Josh?
Baccalaureate. Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Baccalaureate? It's a British word, is it not? I don't know.
Baccalaureate?
Yeah. Is that the speech or? No.
I'm
sorry.
know.
It just popped in my head. I just threw it out there. Probably shouldn't do that online.
Anyway, he's talking to these students and he
Commencement.
Yeah, they're just about to graduate. They're just about to leave school, and it's like they step into the world, and someone's giving them this speech. And he actually talks about he wants to be the head of the Church of Freedom from Concern. That they're worried about stuff. And I'll just read some of his statements. He said, and this was when we're moving on to this overflow, and how we want to get to this thing, how we live in the overflow. But Jim Carrey says this. He goes, how will you serve the world? What do they need that your talent can provide? He said, that's all you have to figure out. And, bringing that into God, like God's put talents in each and every one of us, and so how will I serve the world? That's the overflow of what God's put in me, is to serve the world. He goes, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Like, wow, what an amazing statement. He said, everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart. And obviously that's what you give to others. And he said, I wish people could realize their dreams and wealth and fame so they could see that it's not where you're going to find your sense of completion. He says, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. The journey that we're on. And he says, I'm just making a conscious choice to see challenges as something beneficial so that I can deal with them in the most productive way. But I want to get back to this staffer. He goes, hey, what do they need? He's talking about, what do they need that your talent can provide? What's God put in your heart that is not just for you? The skills, the gifts, the abilities. John, you've got specific gifts and abilities that God's uniquely gifted you with. Josh, the same. You've got, and it's, if you keep it to yourself, the world doesn't benefit. But I think God wants us to get to that point where it overflows out of our life, and we're to live. And I used to say to live in this overflow. You've served 21 years Baptist minister.
21 years in London, 9 years in New York before that.
Yeah, and there's something that you were, school teaching before that. What brought you to that point where it overflowed to that?
Oh, golly. Well, today, of course, is the day of Pentecost, is it not?
Mm.
It's what, when I was a little kid, we used to call Whit Sunday. And when I was a little kid in church, Whit Sunday was just a holiday. It was the school holiday. And as a family, we often went away on holiday for the Whitsun break. But in the late 70s, it took on a whole new meaning, because that was the time when this thing called charismatic renewal swept through lots of churches in the UK and our church as well. Just a Baptist church in Bedford. And it was part of that experience, part of my personal experience of being baptized with the Holy Spirit that brought me to a place of knowing that God was calling me to walk away from school teaching and probably do a different kind of teaching as a pastor in church.
Wow.
And I think of my gifts that God has used over the last 30 years. Bible teaching is probably the principal one. So the teaching is still there, but in a different line. But it was very much for me, it was God's call.
Yeah. What about you, Josh? Living in the overflow. What's that look like for you?
I like how you said that was kind of a pivotal time when the Spirit was moving, that you realized your gift, and that it was something that could be given to the Lord in His service. And it's something that I want for all of us. For me, I really like to encourage people.
You're good at that.
I like to be someone behind the scenes that's like kind of like cheering somebody on and get to see them do something amazing based on my input of saying that's good. That's what I want to see more of in the world. If we don't have people like that, we don't have the Barnabas like that. We don't get the Paul. So that's kind of what I want to be. Someone that's crafting or building on the foundation of the church in a meaningful way, and in allowing for leaders to be what God's calling them to be. That's kind of what I would say my gift is. But I don't know how well I've been using it these last 4 or 5 years. I would definitely like to get behind more people that I see are good and want to build the church effectively. And yeah.
Can I just say, way back in 1980, when this kind of all was really happening for me, I didn't have any sense of being.
Say again, you didn't what?
I did not have any clear sense of being called to be a Bible teacher. I didn't quite know what God was calling me into. I just knew that God was calling me into ministry. And it has been as my ministry developed. In fact, I would say probably after about 6 to 10 years in London, in other words, 15 years into my ministry, that I really realized that teaching God's word was really what I was called for.
Yeah.
So it's,
That's the
I don't
clock.
want anybody, I've apologized for our clock. I've got to switch the chime off.
It's a real English clock.
Don't think, I'm not sure what my gift is, therefore I can't respond to God. That's not how it is. If God is call on your life, you just need to respond, and he will lead you into the gifting he has for you, or the gifting that you already have and perhaps haven't realized.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot.
Yeah, it took me a while, I think, to realize it too. Most of my, upbringing in the church was in music and leading, the singing and all that sort of stuff. But it took me a while to realize that what I initially, when you're young, you think you got it all sorted out. Then as you get a bit older, you realize, well, I didn't really have that sorted out. But I found that, it was like everything I was doing was for my own benefit. But it wasn't until I started to go, hold on, everything that God's given me is actually not for my benefit. Indirectly, it is, but really, it really hit turbo or top gear when I started to let it be for the benefit of others. Then I started to, I suppose, pour into other people. So build up their gift and actually let it overflow. That I started to feel that there was satisfaction in it. There was contentment in it. There was a moment, like all my sons and even my daughter now, but all my sons have played music in church. And there's a moment as a musician dad when you're playing with your kids that there's a proud dad moment that they're my kids, And so that was, a moment I've had. But then it's on another level when you see things that you've, given them the opportunity to do or spoken into them or encouraged them, and then they step up to the plate. That's a whole nother level of contentment that you have to actually let go of yourself for that to happen. You've got to let that overflow. I don't know, having Rachel here with us, John, her playing the violin.
Yes, I was just thinking.
Yeah.
I remember the first time she played in church. She was, I think, 10 years old. And it was the first Sunday in Advent, and we played a song called My Lord, He is a Comin' Soon. And she played that on the violin with a mute, and it was fabulous. And she's gone on, and she's wonderful. Because I play keyboard and guitar. And
well, both David and Rachel are very musical.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yes, David in a slightly different direction, but yeah.
He's got some amazing stuff, and we talk a little bit about the technology. He's into all the dance stuff, and he's doing amazing stuff. But so it's flowed over into your kids, John.
When Rachel began taking responsibility for music and worship in the church, which she did for 13 years, she gave up a couple of years ago now, but she was the first person responsible for the music and worship in a growing church in Whitney, and that was amazing. That was something else after having her play with me in our church to go on and actually take the lead. That was great.
Well, we're coming to an end. We're going to move into a Zoom meeting just after this, and so we hope that people, if you haven't seen it, just write down the number on the bottom of the screen. It's been scrolling through, but really, God calls us. I mean, Jesus ministered to us through the overflow. In a lot of ways, his blood poured out for us. Wow. That overflow, it wasn't overflow. I mean, it was poured out for us. He willingly laid his life down for us. But we were the recipients of what that meant, the recipient of his, dying on the cross. And so he calls us to do the same, to actually not hoard things for ourselves, but to be people. And I think he calls us to be people who always live in that overflow, that it's not, I'm doing what I'm doing just for me. I'm actually allowing it flow over. Yeah. I'm being so generous with my time, with my attention, with my focus, with my gifts, whatever they may be. And so, we've had so much poured into our lives. And I'm sure John and Josh, if we sat down here, we could talk about people that inputted into our lives. I know I can just list people right now that just inputted into my life when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And you know, now I'm seeing the benefit of it, but it was from their overflow.
Wow, yeah.
And so I really hope for someone out there today that encourages them. Josh, I hope it encourages you
It
too.
does, yeah.
You're doing a great job. John, it's been awesome having you with us.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have experienced this, you know, in our Bali experience.
Yeah.
Tremendous. It was 4 years ago that we heard that our youngest son had been arrested and was being imprisoned in Bali. And we had no knowledge of Bali, no Bali contact at all. And it was through a nephew of mine that we were put in touch with an Australian couple called Shane and Mel Sinclair. I don't know if anybody remembers them. They, in those days, were part of ISB. And through them, they organised accommodation for us in our very first trip. And through them, we were introduced to Pastor Steve and Anita, of course.
Yeah.
And it was through Pastor Steve that we were introduced to Doug and Kimberly. And it was through Doug that we finally got introduced to you. And we just feel that we've had such amazing support and blessing from so many people. We were thrilled to have one couple that could kind of help us out when we first came to Bali. We were a bit devastated because their term finished and they went back to Australia very soon after that. And we felt that we were kind of almost left bereft, but we weren't left bereft at all. Because one had introduced us to another, who'd introduced us to another, who'd introduced us to another. And now we just have so many really good friends in Bali. We should have been, as you know, we should have been with you now.
Yeah.
I might
Come on. We're waiting.
Above Mikey's Madhouse right now. That's possible.
Let's go. You don't have to be so locked down over here. And you don't know how long that lockdown's going to go for. So everybody come to Bali.
God's provision.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's always overflowing.
Yeah. And so we really appreciate you, John. We appreciate Janet as well. And we miss you guys. Just before I do forget, seeing I'm talking to you from the UK, a big shout out to George and Sarah. Sarah's just about to have the baby.
I was wondering about
She
that.
hasn't.
Wow.
I think
haven't heard. She said she'll let me know.
Joe messaged her, yesterday?
Wow.
Joe's just here, but she's still in one piece, she said. She'll let us know when she becomes two. So big shout out to you guys. But George and Sarah. So for John, I really appreciate it. I know you've got a service to go to. For everyone else, Joe, you want to log into?
Yes.
Joe's here.
Hi.
Here she is.
Hi.
So she's
Bye.
She's gonna log in right now to our Zoom meeting just next to us. So if you want to go and join that, you can join that with us. And where's Janet? We'll just get Janet in there. Where are you, Janet? There you are.
Hey.
So good to have you guys with us. So appreciate it. So we'll leave you guys to go to your service. We'll catch up with you. I'll message you during the week. But good to speak to you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
And for Josh, it's great to have you. It's been good. We're going to head into the Zoom room. So if you've never joined us in the Zoom room, Joe's online now. The number on the screen, let me just put it down the bottom here again, just in case you didn't get it. 818, sounds like a telephone here, 2798 2563. Head over there, and Josh and I are going to join the Zoom chat as well. But come if you've got any questions, you want to add anything to the conversation that we've spoken about today, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well and your experiences. If you need prayer, we'd love to pray for you in that Zoom room. So come and join us. And so Joe's waiting for you right now. We will leave you to it. Don't forget to catch us during the week on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, wherever you may catch us. This week, by the way, we actually went also live to Periscope.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't really make mention of that, but we have been on Periscope. So if you have tuned in on Periscope, thanks for joining us. But apart from that, we will leave you to it. Have a fantastic week. We love you guys. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Stay groovy, everybody.